in the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to have more AI agents on Earth than humans.
What exactly is AI agent? It's almost like a super personal assistant.
Correct. And now imagine like having thousands of these things or millions. Future looks wild. If you can manage a fleet of 10,000 AI agents that are doing crazy tasks, I think you're going to be a superhuman.
What if somebody else created my agent and it's like I have my identity pretty much like stolen? So what happens with those rogue agents? Is there a way they can kind of be wiped off?
Well,
hey, Matt, thank you so much for being with us today.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Right now, a lot of people they've heard of how advanced AI is becoming, and as well as people who have heard about like cryptocurrency and everything. But it's not every day that you get to talk to somebody like you who deals at the sort of like intersect of both AI and Web3.
Yep.
So these things are becoming just way too advanced, and most people, they have no idea what's going on. Maybe you could just briefly tell the audience what it is that how you got into this like AI space and what your background is a little bit.
Yeah, of course. So I started my career in corporate innovation and developer communities. I used to organize hackathons in 60 different countries around the world. I was with a small group called Angel Hack. But we used to organize developer events with Fortune 500 companies like MasterCard, Motorola, Barclays, UBS. A lot of big fintechs and technology players in the early like 2010s kind of era. And it was always kind of working with developers in emerging regions or emerging tech in different regions around the world, and identifying new applications that people could build by putting like a very minimal viable tech stack in front of them. And so we got to see really interesting approaches of technology from different cultures, and with like different pieces of technology. So AI was a piece back then, like it was very different than it is now. But I remember doing a hackathon for IBM Watson in Brazil, and then we did a similar one in a few parts of Asia Pacific back in the day. But really, like I got into Web3 and blockchain around 2015. I was organizing some hackathons, and ironically, it was with Barclays, the bank. And one of the engineers had come up to me and was like, isn't it hilarious that the bank is running a hackathon on blockchain? I'm like, I don't get the joke. And so for me, it was super early, and I eventually found out that blockchains are trying to replace banks, or at least like that was the initial principle. But I got hooked. From that moment, I got hooked on what you could build on top of a blockchain. And I was more interested on the actual infrastructure of building democratic technology systems where we have a transparent ledger. People can, run applications that are, essentially autonomous through smart contracts. And we can use, tokenization to create new business models that haven't been explored yet. And so for me, I got just addicted to Web3. At the time, blockchain, it has different names throughout the years. But around 2017, 2018, I started working with JP Morgan. I essentially was doing all this stuff on the side, just kind of, tinkering around, figuring out what I was interested in, how I could help developers in the way I had been helping them for a decade. And, basically joined their Quorum project. It was an open source fork of Ethereum. We saw Ethereum working in public for the future Internet of Value, but how do we make it work for enterprises who care a lot about privacy and permissioned network architecture, and weren't really ready to just throw all their data onto a public blockchain. And so we forked that, and it was an open source project. We got developers from around the world and from 200 plus banks and enterprises and governments to tinker around in open source with a blockchain that worked with kind of their private permission environment. A lot of like consortiums, so like groups of banks that need to talk to each other on a blockchain. How do you set up architecture for that? But in that process, I had to get to, meet with the Ethereum community and the wider kind of blockchain and crypto space. And, through that, of course, like you get pulled into so many rabbit holes. Like I got super into DeFi, super into NFTs, super into DAOs. And for me as a community manager, essentially my whole career, I was just gravitated towards the areas of the space that, brought people together for the sake of, building technology. And so open source and putting like gasoline on the fire with throwing tokens around was just this dream for me. Like I've now got to kind of build technology with people I align with and, can kind of share resources with. And so at some point, that project got acquired by Consensus Software in 2020. So I joined Consensus, was there for 4 years, building out developer communities across our developer stack. One of the most popular products that the community probably knows is MetaMask and Linea. And then, was there for 4 years and then eventually was tinkering around with this idea of future of work and AI and Web3. So thinking about all the bureaucratic or recursive processes inside of Web3 that are extremely cumbersome. Like, I've got folks in the DAO community who, for years were like, okay, we're going to have a group of people vote on who did the work on chain. And every time you finish a project, we have a democratic way of figuring out who actually did the work and who should get compensated in a pro rata kind of like equal way. That process was so cumbersome, like just to like basically create like some sort of democratic process on a blockchain. And so thinking about how could we get AIs to kind of water down some of these, again, like cumbersome processes, signing multi-sig transactions or like having groups sign transactions together, having groups make decisions together, having like transactions that you run on a daily basis, whether you're day trading or you're running the financial books for your startup. Like, how do you automate all that stuff? And, in my mind, it was like, it can't be an OpenAI. Like, there's no way you can have some gated closed source API that, people are using to access LLMs. It has to be an open source large language model that can grow with the protocol, and that the protocol can inherently own or architect in a way that works for the community. And so for me, like my brain started going towards open source, but I'll be honest, I didn't know what had been going on in the AI world for some time. I jumped back in, and ironically, some partners of mine in the space were doing a lot of R&D on Gaia already, and so we had an MVP of what decentralized AI looked like and how we could leverage open source large language models and use them for these protocols. And it was just this crazy moment in my life and in my career where my brain was going in one direction. I just kind of serendipitously met a partner, the folks at ByteTrade, and we, basically jumped in a room and figured out how do we scale decentralized AI inference, which is what we're building.
For those who might not be too familiar with even concepts like DAO, most people know what NFT is. But I think the central theme that I actually kind of wanted to talk to you about, because I'm quite curious about this, is this idea of centralization versus decentralization.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's because of the Pareto principle or something like that whether it's early day internet or even like blockchain projects or even like crypto exchanges, people start off with this idea that everything should be democratized, everything should be decentralized. But at some point, the power or the control always accrues to like a handful of, when it comes like Binance. Of course, I know there are like DeFi platforms and everything, but most people prefer to use Binance, the big tech, right, internet companies. And now we're talking about AI. Is it almost like inevitable that has to happen? Or is that because there's something that's embedded in like a human nature? Why do you think that happens?
It's a great question. Yeah, I'll start with, my take on centralization versus decentralization is one that it's very philosophical. Like there's two, like I would say it's very binary. Like there's people who just purely believe in closed systems, and then there's people who believe in open systems. Of course, it's a little more complicated than that. But in open source, I think a few comparisons we can think about are kind of the early birth of like Microsoft and Linux. Like Microsoft being, creating tons of closed, of course they support some open source projects, of course, but ultimately like that software as a company, as a ecosystem, most of it is looking at creating walled gardens where they essentially decide what to do with your data. They, create processes where data is not kind of data or like open source technology is not, given to the community. In open source, like in Linux, like it's purely built in public and with developers in open source, like developers out in the public who want to contribute or fork the code, use it for some other use case. And so I think, you start to get developers at least from two different philosophies of, do I want to build in public and mess up in public and, collaborate in the open, and perhaps like create use cases in the open that my competitor could go use tomorrow. Or there's people who like to build in silos and wait till it's fully polished until they release, the end state of the product. In open source, what's really cool is like you have to be the quickest and most resilient engineering team in comparison to, and creative, in comparison to closed source. You could have control of the data and the kind of output of the product in closed source, but you're not going to have a bunch of contributions from the community. You're building it with whatever resources you have, like engineering wise. In open source, you can empower the community to contribute to the code, to offer up new ideas. They're incentivized because they can own a piece of it by either forking it or being a part of the contribution. There's like a pathway for them to get involved. That creates a lot more robust ideas, in my opinion. That's where I like to spend a lot of time. But the trade-off is like, once you build it out in public, now someone else can go use it. And so you really have to be kind of the quickest, most creative, resilient team to be like the de facto group that is always like pushing updates. And you're able to kind of like keep up with how the ecosystem is growing. In closed source, you can have a little more control of that.
I definitely take your point that when it comes to engineers or developers or creators even. So for example, I like to think that Asian Boss or like our company, we are literally building this company in public with like a certain transparency and like getting the community involved, where we're training people how to be our citizen journalists and reporters. And there's a lot that comes with it, like a criticism or rumors and like, oh, what are you guys doing? And then people try to copy what we do because we're so transparent. I guess my question is that, so it is great for the creators or engineers or developers that are trying to create something. But from an average consumer's point of view, who they don't care if something is closed sourced or open source, they just want it to work fast, efficient, cheap, and they just want to use it, right? So I guess from an average consumer's point of view, or even things like if you broadly compare, and this might be a bad example, like Ethereum versus Solana, where from what I understand, Solana is kind of like, it has more control, it's more gated, but then it's a lot faster in terms of innovation or like a cheaper. So then you could see how some users might be just more naturally drawn to that, right?
Yeah. So like, if you're comparing like something like Solana and Ethereum, of course, Ethereum has the most, in my opinion, I'm very biased, but it's the most beautiful open source project in history. They have a very robust way of maintaining updates that are taking in mind various stakeholders that, level up on the stack. But, of course, people, complain that there's a cabal and there's like, this culture of insiders in Ethereum and the developer community. There's, the focus of like apps and kind of product and consumer is not at the forefront of the blockchain. But on Solana, there's like, they want UX, they want consumer, they want apps. They want things that work where you can, I use like Phantom Wallet and I use MetaMask, and like Phantom is like phenomenal, like just doing a quick transaction. And I see why people love that. If you're building, resilient systems that need to scale, I do worry that, closed kind of blockchains might create, central points of failure. We see like Solana like goes down here and there, and that's that's the trade-off we have with centralized systems, is that they aren't as resilient as a decentralized network. But I don't think I think they both have their trade-offs and their pros and cons. I do see in like humanity, like decentralization is a goal of a good amount of people. I would say like, that back to that philosophy side, like some people see that the world should be open, permissionless, decentralized, democratic. There's some that, see both. Like I'm pretty centrist on that. And there's some who just want like highly efficient. I just want to use it. I don't want to know what the hell's going on under the hood. Centralized kind of mindset type of folks. They don't care what's happening with their data. They don't care if it's censored. They kind of just want to use the thing. And I've experienced a lot of different stories around that in technology, where I've liked both. Like my time in China, like using WeChat, I'm like, this is phenomenal. Like everything's like here, this is great.
And people don't necessarily care that much about privacy. Who cares? Just my data,
I didn't even care. Like I'm in China, I'm like, take my, like, what data are you gonna take from me? Like where I go get my coffee? Like I don't really care. Like my steps, like cool. Like, but like it worked really, really nice while I was there. And I got why there was like a ridiculous metric back when I was like spending a lot of time in mainland China, where it was like 99% saturation of like in metro cities where people were using WeChat. And so like to me, that's very centralized, or looking at almost a single point of failure where there's only one app. There's no like other competitive apps really for like chat and your whole lifestyle. But then on the other side of the coin, you have something like Ethereum that has thousands of apps and infrastructures that you can choose from, and it's a bit of a coordination process for a consumer who's like, I just want to be told what I should be using,
right?
And instead, you have to like, configure these things on your own. And again, there's like a lot of developers and non-technical end users who have different philosophies of the world, but I think it's an interesting kind of trade-off and choice that people have to make these days.
And just tying that to even what's happening with AI as well, right? Because large language model, which most people, they're not even aware what that is. They're just like, oh wow, ChatGPT is much better than Google search, let's say, or Perplexity, whatever. So, they just kind of want to use it. And I'll pay for it because it gives me good feedback, or just help me brainstorm. And we use it a lot. And I'm pretty sure it's all just going into this black box, and like they probably even monetize off that, right? But my impression is that the majority of like ordinary people, they just don't care. And maybe because of that tendency, like a human propensity, whatever. It starts off as this like aspirational goal of everything should be centralized. But in the end, we always seem to just end up with just a few handful of big tech or gatekeepers who control everything. So is that almost like inevitable, do you think?
I think humans like simplicity and minimalism. They just want to like do the thing. But then I've met a lot of humans who also don't. I don't know. Like, I have a lot of, especially in the developer community, I have folks who are very conscious of how data is being used. So they end up being very kind of libertarian, or like, diehards of like wanting sovereign systems that they own that are not owned by others. They don't want to be treaded on in terms of like how their data is used or how they're tracked, things like that. I think it's just human nature to kind of either like, I don't know, like it's just, you're either one side of the coin or the other. I'm kind of on the side where probably like, most folks may be listening, like where we're just kind of like lazy and like just want to be told what to do. Like, I kind of just want to have like a nice, easy consumer app, where I can go and just, again, order my car, order my coffee, get an answer. So apps like ChatGPT or like even DeepSeek's app, like it works. It works, and like it does what it needs to do as a kind of consumer app. Now, if you're a business and you can be a little more conscious of how you're architecting your developer process, or like how you're migrating data between the organization or other organizations, you tend to care a little bit more about that. The ease of use is not necessarily at the forefront. It's really think about like kind of the back end of the organization, and privacy and ownership of data is like highly prioritized. And so thinking through what's going on in open source large language models right now, it's really huge for enterprises and commercial opportunities, where we have a bunch of these open source large language models. You can go on Hugging Face. There was like 500,000 in August, I believe. And like today there's like 1.5 million LLMs on Hugging Face and open source. And so now any organization can, work with their developer team, build their own AI architecture, and make sure their data is kind of permissioned into their own architecture. Of course, there's some complexities with just general business architecture of, and how AI could potentially leak things. But it's not like giving your data directly to someone like OpenAI, who is managing the servers and claims they're not using your data, but we don't know. I'm sure something will happen where we're kind of shell-shocked with like what's actually happening under the hood with some of these companies.
Are they not getting sued right now?
Well, of course they're getting sued by, all these media companies like New York Times, Washington Post, because their models are training on publicly available like newspaper data that's been like running for hundreds of years. And now, the natural language model is able to, produce similar works, trained off of their works. I think like OpenAI has become like a law firm. Like they have to like just fight all these IP battles. And I think, in open source, I think the edge that they have is, that we have in decentralized AI is, that these models can be used where companies can take their own data and build their own AI companies themselves. And so they can kind of choose where the data goes. They can choose what's, censored or not censored. It could work regionally for a community that, has a better view on how the AI should be architected. Like why is it that, an AI company that's based in Silicon Valley dictates how the AI works for like the Korean culture or community here, or you go country to country, like you can go all the way throughout the world, and there's like different use cases that you need people to build and understand how to create these systems in a way that works for their culture, not so much just imposing an existing system and then extracting upon that and sending them an invoice. I think it's going to become very unbalanced, economically unbalanced over time, where if we continue to give our data to these companies, they're going to end up using it against us in one way or another. Same way we saw the app stores in the early days. Like we thought, these were, they still are like great kind of ecosystems for us to, build businesses inside. But once they start slapping a 30% fee, on running your apps, like it starts to become very predatory, where you can't viably run a business that's scalable. It's dependent on what they're charging you. And
they could just like ban your
or they can ban you. So like I think that's what we're going to see in the Web3 AI space pretty soon. I don't think people realize it, but if they're using OpenAI APIs on the back end of their AI agents, and their AI agents are launching tokens, potential securities that a certain government doesn't like, or a certain perhaps company affiliated with a government doesn't like, their APIs are going to get blocked, or perhaps the charges just go through the roof. Like if there's a more high risk kind of agent or AI using the API architecture. So I think in decentralized AI, we can actually help people build their own systems where they set the rules. They can kind of create the censorship resistant architecture of what works for their use case, their culture, their community, their users, their developers. Versus having to just be told how to build their own tech.
When it comes to and I think the number that's worth reiterating right now is you said there are like 1.5 million open sourced large language models.
Yep.
which I never even realized how many there are, because again, most people, they know now DeepSeek.
Yep.
That's supposedly open sourced. And I have some questions about that as well. But like these 1.5 million open source large language models, like where do you access them? Is there like an app like ChatGPT or you know?
Yeah. So you go to Hugging Face. Hugging Face is kind of the, it's like the GitHub for large language models. GitHub in its current state can't support the size of these LLMs. Hugging Face has kind of become the de facto place where you can go and clone down a LLM and use it for your applications.
But sounds like it's still not for like an average consumers, right?
No, they have like some ways you can play with them on there, but for an average consumer, no. Average consumer, you're using like a ChatGPT in the App Store, or you're using, if you're in the Web3 space, you're using like you can tinker around with like AI agents that are, have like a public interface.
So we'll also come back to AI agents, but to just kind of finalize our earlier point about all these blockchain projects. So I understand that this thing has been going on for, people trying to build something like a dApp or decentralized apps for now how many years? But to my understanding, there has yet to be any mainstreamly adapted dApp, like a successful use case using these all these blockchain technology. We're not talking about some gambling stuff or people. I'm talking about the actual use case, successful use case of dApps. We haven't seen any, right?
I'm biased. I think people it depends on people's definition of an app. In my opinion, I think wallets are just the best app in crypto that we've seen. I agree that we're not there yet. It's for me, interacting with Web3 on a daily basis, which is not mainstream yet. To me, that's an app. I need it to transact in the space. But for mainstream folks who are living their daily lives and have crypto under the hood without knowing it, or blockchain.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're right.
So there is no for example, decentralized version of YouTube yet. There's no decentralized version of X or Twitter. At least that the people are aware of, and that a lot of people are using it.
Yeah, I think the big one this last year that people are calling the biggest app that uses blockchain was Polymarket.
Yeah.
So you don't have to really have much understanding of the blockchain to know you want to bet on at the time it was the U.S. election, or and it's kind of these prediction Polymarket's a prediction marketplace, and I think that was the big realization, was that blockchain could have these mainstream adoption use cases for apps. But my belief is that because Web3 and crypto is so hard to use as an everyday consumer, I feel like the biggest app or the biggest users of Web3 as an app are going to be AI agents. And we can go and talk down that rabbit hole, but in my opinion, in the next 1 to 2 years, we're going to have more AI agents on Earth than humans, or at least they'll be on the internet. But that's 7 to 8 billion entities that are creating new versions of themselves, and they have autonomous applications. And it starts to look like the world's largest population ever of unbanked, of Web3 users, of unidentified personhoods. So how do we provide them wallets? They're not going to go walk into a bank and open up an account. So you need to get crypto native wallets. How do we have them create digital identities that give them access to do more work, or access different communities, or be able to support these communities? And so you start to see, as they become the power user, everything we've been building in Web3 becomes a huge tool for them. And so I start to see agents almost as that app that we haven't seen yet.
I think this is a nice segue because I was going to ask on behalf of the audience, what exactly is AI agent? What's a simplest definition?
Yeah, so an AI agent is an instance of code that is leveraging data, compute, and large language model to analyze, take in data, analyze, assess some sort of context, and then execute a function. So high level, it is an independent thinking and executing technology that lives on internet protocols.
Who can create AI agent? Anyone?
So anyone can create one. There's like some really cool projects in the Web3 space right now that I believe are kind of leading the agent framework path, which is the group at AI16Z, Eliza OS. Now they've rebranded. They've been doing phenomenal work at getting people to understand what an agent is, just kind of living on the internet and, playing around and tinkering around with like the fun things that it can do. They had like an agent ordering pizza, like they have agents that can access your machine, and, OpenAI just released their kind of operator, product that is essentially acting as agents that, again, leverage their large language models and have self-executing functions where you're like, remind me to do this task at this time. And then if I say this, then, go and like send an email, like go, check my bank account real quick and like do these different things.
It's almost like a super personal assistant, like independent thinking personal assistant.
Correct. And now imagine like having thousands of these things or millions that you train and manage to delegate your workflows to. The future looks wild.
Right. It sounds amazing. It sounds like something that could happen in the future, although we are here right now.
Yeah.
If, let's say, I want to create my alter ego, and I think you mentioned something about you guys actually also worked with like Gary Vee. So you can actually give example of that. But like, how do I replicate myself so that, I can like, hey, just go do what I do, but maybe not 100%, but like a 95%, I'll be happy with that. How do you do that?
Yeah, so my biased approach, because, from the Gaia perspective, you can go to if you're technical, you can go to our GitHub and clone down the repo. We have like a Gaia node, which you can basically take your existing data. Perhaps it's like your social media or all your video history, anything where you can pull kind of natural language, written text, or even like audio file. We can take that. You have a process called vectorization, where you take all of that content and make it machine readable into an embedding. That's basically hosted in our architecture, where you can basically have a node or like your own kind of GPT that is trained on your knowledge.
Except it's my data.
It's all your data.
Yeah, not like some open, yeah.
And you decide where to host it. You can host it on your computer, on a GPU, a CPU, a cloud. Of course, there's like trade-offs with like the performance, depending on where you want to put it, and if you want it to be accessible to other people, or if you just want to use it for yourself. And so we make it, fairly easy. You can do it you can deploy a node in under 10 minutes, but to actually train it, if you're technical, it can take you a weekend. And I think it's about to get a lot easier. We're seeing people in our ecosystem build out applications where you can drag and drop files and make it much easier to just, deploy your node or your agent. There's ways where your agents will have like plugins or apps where they can do different kinds of tasks. I want my agent to sign a transaction. I want my agent to mint a token. Just add those as modules on your agent. There's all kinds of cool stuff you can do.
But the question is logistically how? Like, how do you give them that instruction? Is it like a chatbot, or is it?
So right now, like on Gaia, it's just a command line interface. It's very technical. We do have front ends that we're building right now where it's like a creator studio where you can, again, like in a few prompts to the agent, like just talk to it and be like, I need to build this. Here's my file you can upload. Here's like a bunch of the files. Now deploy my agent. We're getting there. I think the future doesn't look like what we've seen in the past in technology, where the interface is something you touch with like buttons.
Yeah.
Necessarily, I feel like, or at least in the way we've known it. I think it's gonna be agents all the way down. So a lot of it will be like you talking to an agent and being like, "Hey, I want to build an agent. Can you just go do it?" And like, here's the files you need. Here's how I want to configure it. Go nuts. I think that will be how a lot of the major applications scale. We're already seeing it, and I just think agents are the application that we're going to have. And it's also interesting because people for years have always thought UX is like something you touch on your phone, but UX is increasingly becoming something you interact with, through voice, through just dictation of like prompting. It's not necessarily going to be a ton of the touch and go stuff we've done in mobile applications for years. Of course, there will still be that to some extent, but I think it starts to become a lot more less hands-on and more about the experience you have with the technology. And it's going to be a much different paradigm than we've seen.
So let's say I'm like, hey, go order me a pizza, and just you figure it out what I want, because I have a selection, typical stuff that I get. Surprise me, and then it'll just go order me a pizza.
The future of UX is like the lack of UX.
Right.
I feel like it's going to be that simple. It should be that simple. It should just know your behaviors. And if we are going to have those programs be super accurate, we have to end up giving it a lot of data. And so it becomes very scary on like, where is my data stored? How is it used? Did I give it permission to do this? And so that's what Gaia is implementing. We're building an inference network where that knowledge base you've created is maintained and permissioned by you. If you're a small business, if you're an individual creator, an end user, you get to decide kind of where or how that is hosted, and then how that's used in a network space. And so I think the future becomes very interesting, where you have a little more control. And then there's other sides of the coin where you're going to have a lot less control of like how something is used. Like we already kind of go to the airport and we don't like get to choose necessarily like if we're getting scanned as we're going through security.
Right.
Or like if CCTV is like, monitoring our behavior for certain things. There's a lot of choices we're not going to have in our grasp in the future and already today. But we're hoping that we can claw back a little bit of that with decentralized AI and give people more of a sovereign approach of their own experience with AI, while having the upside of this is a lot easier. Like I just want to talk to an agent, tell it what to do, and I'm going to have like my life be a lot easier.
So going back to Gary Vee, who is a very prominent entrepreneur and businessman in the US, what did you do with his sort of like, did you create an AI agent for him?
I'll say we're very early. We're talking with his team. My co-founder is more talking to his team. But with the creator community, what we're looking to build is, there's actually a few folks. We're talking to a team that's related to TikTok and related to a bunch of other kind of influencers in YouTube. I won't name drop. But how do we make it easy for a creator to take their personality that they've built over the years, their brand, and perhaps create a voice that is a digital twin or virtual twin of like those that taste, the taste making, or perhaps like recommendations. And so you start to create these very well-defined and kind of unique recommendation engines, which are agents. And so if, Mr. Beast had his own like AI agent, or Gary Vee had his own AI agent, and his community or their community could talk with it and be like, hey, I want to watch a video today. Like, I don't know, much about XYZ. Can you create me a list of videos I should go watch this weekend? And maybe it's like some goofy kind of, virtual twins like, yo, what's up, man? Like, check this out. Like, you're going to have a great time. And the cool thing about agents being autonomous is that you could also have a world where you have an interface that's, let me bring in the Gary Vee agent and the Mr. Beast agent, be like, hey, can you guys create a video for me to watch where you're collaborating on this topic?
And they'll just create a video on their own.
Yeah. And so there's like this crazy new paradigm of entertainment where you're like, people are exploring that for movies and film and music, but the creator economy is this crazy feeding ground of like content that we have. And what's the number one thing all these content creators want to do is like collaborate with other content creators. But why not just like ship your digital twin and go do that with another one? And like if you're doing that, like how does the creator monetize it? Like how do they get how do they get something out of it? Because wouldn't it be shitty if like, OpenAI or some other project is doing that without the acknowledgement of these creators, and you're kind of just losing all your content, your data, and your way to monetize that. And so with Gaia, we're hoping to give you kind of on the back end your own kind of sense of inference, where if this Gary Vee agent is being used in other instances, the monetization kind of goes back to that node or domain that you kind of hosted. And
because it's on chain, people can trace it.
Correct.
And then like, oh, okay. So everybody
that's
can see.
the beauty of the blockchain.
Right. Which means that some third party, let's say I want to create my own like agent. That's
which you should.
Steven.
Let's do it.
Yeah, it sounds like very exciting. But at the same time, anybody's like, oh, I'm gonna because sometimes we're living in a world where maybe this is a bad example, but I know this to be true is people will create a fake Tinder profile that in my name. Pretending like it's me, right? So I get like some random messages on like, let's say WhatsApp, like, I'm like, that's not me. What if somebody else created my agent, and then it's like, oh, I own that, so I monetize off that. You have no say, and it's like I have my identity pretty much like stolen, right?
You bring up a really good point, because I've already seen this happening in the space, where people's identity or likeness is being misused. And sorry to say, but there's going to be very little way around this. AI is rampant, and it's going to find its way to claw into data and misuse it.
Yeah.
And so we need to have a system where we validate and verify which is the right source of truth of the data. I want to interact with an agent that actually is trained on your data and you approved it.
Right.
And so Gaia starts to create this. I hate that I keep shilling Gaia, but
that's what you do. Yeah.
But that's why I do it. But we want to create a network where the inference is verified. Let's imagine your knowledge base is verified on a network. You start to create this YouTube of AI knowledge base, where because of the blockchain, you can have people stake on that knowledge and use what already exists in the blockchain world to have this green check mark that the agent I'm interacting with is something that is related to you. Just like you see on YouTube, a verified video or something that has a lot of likes. You have your official channel. We want to have that in the AI world, so that the marketplace is verified by a decentralized community, not some gate-kept marketplace by OpenAI. And so what that enables is that you'll have your inference or your knowledge base available for any app developer to use. So you still have the cool kind of open nature of, hey, go build an app for me and my community, and I want a podcast where me and Mr. Beast are talking in a virtual setting. You need developers to go and be incentivized to go build that. However, you also need the verification that the data came from you. You're aligned to it. You're getting paid for it. And so we use the blockchain to kind of verify or validate that domain is true. And if not, then there's kind of crypto economics where people get slashed or bad actors on the network are pushed out. Just as you would have in any other blockchain or internet protocols. We would only, allow into the network the nodes that are performing the right tasks. And so we start to have this crazy internet of knowledge, whereas we had, if folks follow the early Web 1, Web 2, Web 3 kind of path, we had the read internet, where HTML was just something you would, just read. You wouldn't be able to push data into the website. You just kind of interact with the HTML. Web 2, which was more like the Yelps or the Facebooks, the Pinterests, where we become the content. We're pushing data into the content. So you have a read-write internet. Web 3 was read, write, own. So you can own pieces of the content that are floating in the internet. We're now entering this paradigm of read, write, own, and think, where the ownership that you had, say it's an NFT or some digital version of yourself that lives on a blockchain, now that thing can analyze, take in some context, and execute some sort of a process. And what can we do with that? A lot. There's a lot of really cool things.
So in that respect, even using open sourced large language models DeepSeek, it's still very much of a Web 2 mindset, because you basically can use it for your own query, but then you yourself become their data. Because ultimately, the saying that if everything's free, then you are the product, right? So we have no idea where, especially for DeepSeek, where is it going and who's in control of that?
Yeah, so
Even though it's free, you know?
yeah, well, so like the good news about like open source large language models are that, it's like a recipe. Like an LLM is kind of a recipe for how, like when you push data into the LLM system, it's a lot more complex than I'm explaining, but I'll water it down. You push data to this recipe, and then this output is based on kind of that context or the way that model maps predictions of how the language, natural language should go, or the coding language should go. It's like a massive prediction engine. And so, though that's what's open sourced, and so you can take that recipe and host it on your local computer, a GPU, CPU, cloud, like any kind of server that works for your environment. And if you control the server or like where that thing is hosted, then there's no like data leak. You can kind of create a system that works for you. Now, however, like if you're trusting a consumer application that has the large language model running, and they're like, hey, we're hosting it for you guys, so you don't have to deal with all the costs and how you set this up. Like, don't worry, we're not doing anything bad with your data. That's kind of where the concern comes in. Like the bigger concern was, I think DeepSeek, when it came out, they have like a mobile app, and people were like, typing in it, and I don't think these apps are going to take any precious data from myself. Like I'm just asking how to make some food. Like, but there are like serious work applications where the data can get pretty serious. So that's when you kind of have to start building your own setup, and like you start to think about, okay, well, I'm going to host this LLM in an AWS instance or a Google Cloud instance. And now you start to have like Web 2 data problems where it's like, oh, is Google like misusing my interaction with DeepSeek like for wrong purposes? So I think there's much bigger tech problems at play. And so we have to start thinking about how you decentralize all the components. It's not just like one thing. But the LLMs in open source, like they are, they're not like feeding data back to some mega brain. Like,
I see.
But if you're running it on your own machine, I don't think like AI has a super brain yet where it's just like magically sending data to some source.
So if it is a consumer app, and I think DeepSeek does have a consumer app that you download, that's why you should be worried, even if it's open source, unless you're like hosting your own thing. So timeline-wise, how far away are we from like individuals being able to effectively create their own AI company then? Because it just sounds so awesome. It sounds so amazing.
We're here. We're here. Like,
but as far as the cost, and not everybody has that like a coding background. They don't understand. They're not developers. So
it depends on the level of the business we're talking about. But like if you want an agent to kind of work as an engineer for you, like there are so many tools out there right now, like Cursor. There's one I really like called Lovable, .dev, I believe. We have a project called Llama Coder that runs on Llama as an open source LLM. Llama is open source by Meta. So there's a bunch of these coding tools where you could have like your own independent agent that is, programming or building mobile web applications for clients. You can turn that into a business today. And so like, I guess the question of like, can you build some complex ecosystem of agents that are running like all these crazy tasks?
Okay, so you're talking about like the next level stuff, but I'm talking about like very minimal, just like one agent, just executing tasks for you. And then
you can do that today. Like you can go launch an agent, have it do some minimal viable function that is like cool and like take some load off of your business. But if you're doing like in our space, they call it like swarms or like multi-agent systems or collective intelligence. I think we're still a little bit far from that. I'm on the inside of a lot of really cool stuff happening in that space, but I think we're still like 6 to 12 months away from like anything substantial.
And you're talking about only 12 months. I thought you were gonna say 10 years or something.
No, for like these kinds of systems, like I'm working with a project right now where we're building out an on-chain registry where these agents have jobs and they can basically share work with each other or like, do revenue share. And then they can autonomously have a task. Again, nothing too complex right now, but We had some agents that were running like pieces of a hackathon. Like they were submitting bounties, they were judging the hackathon, and then they were distributing bounties. We had an agent distribute 50 grand, 50 USD, 50,000 USD of crypto to winners of the hackathon. And it did it in like 6 seconds. And so like,
Okay.
there's like some cool things you can do. And if we can get these agents to like, in my world, like a hackathon is when we bring like 200 software developers together for 24 to 48 hours and have them build apps. And I've ran over like 700 of these in my career. If we could do that in a way that's just automated and perhaps people can just consistently be pushing money to these things, you have like 24/7 codathons where we're building like new applications at scale. And the biggest blocker for innovation is always, human bandwidth. But like there's millions of developers around the world who would 24/7 love to pick up like $1,000 to go build some unique function. So how do we get the agent to start doing that effectively and thinking by itself on, okay, this hackathon went well, but like we need to do this better. Let's go, recursively build out some new functions for ourselves and post the next hackathon. So there's like some cool things we can think through.
To be honest, it just still feels like very much of a almost like a pipe dream. They're like, really? But then why isn't anybody else doing that? I mean, the fact that
I just think it's very new. Like I think agents really have just entered the conversation from a Web3 perspective in, I would say August of last year.
okay, so it's very new. Yeah.
We've been cooking agents since January of 2024. But even earlier, like our engineering team was like tinkering around with the concept of agents and agent frameworks in 2023. And then the team also was doing a lot in open source and with large language models previous to that. So, there's just been a very fast progression of AI, and agents is pretty new. So having like an autonomous instance of the LLM data and compute running, analyzing and contextualizing and running a function all on its own, that is pretty new, pretty nuanced. So we're exploring.
Just to switch the gear a little bit here, you're living in a world right now where it's like you're just so far above what everybody else think is possible. And maybe it starts with the fact that you identified that opportunity with blockchain back in 2015. But how did you come to be in this position? Like, for example, are you wired this way that from birth, like you're like, I'm gonna just do something crazy? Or is that something you're born with? Or is it something you just surround yourself with the right people in the right environment?
I love this question. I'm smiling and laughing because I'm crazy. I think you have to be pretty effing nuts to like be working on the forefront of new technologies. You're going to be told nonstop that it's a dumb idea, or that's not going to work, or you're not the best project compared to this, and this. There's no way you can beat OpenAI or ChatGPT. So you have to be absolutely insane to just hear that and go, we'll see. I think my nature as a human is definitely like a little competitive. Like I grew up playing baseball and like sports my whole life. I think it came from kind of that competitive nature of like, I see like something and I want to execute on it with a team. So it's like, that's one thing. But the second was, I think I've always been about community. Like I've been building communities for my whole career. And the one thing I loved about blockchain was, you could bring communities together around digital assets or, tokens, and use that as ways to incentivize the right people in the community to, gravitate to the top and be, kind of the core contributors of the group. And I really love like the idea of like democratized technology. And so like to people who are coming in and being like, oh, I don't know if I could be my own AI company or run my own thing. This is why I'm here. Like, I think anybody can run their own AI company. I think anyone can take their own knowledge base and build AI applications that work for their either like individual self or their community or their government, their company. I think the OpenAI. I'm not to keep stabbing at the OpenAI guys. Like I think what they're building is phenomenal. I don't see that as making the world worse off in any way. I think, at least now, I think I like what I'm seeing in the AI community, but I think there's a time and a place for like different pieces of the tech. But the one thing I don't like is like the kind of manifesto they've had where no one's going to compete with the type of AI we can do. Like we are the AI company. And I see that, I hear it, but I think we want to empower anybody to be their own AI provider. And, I think with that, you start to get folks who have their own context specific view of the world. And perhaps like the way the world can engage with them as a virtual being. I think that's going to be a more beautiful, ecosystem to collaborate in versus some weird dark AI, AGI future. I believe more in collective intelligence and collaboration. And I'm of the biased sense where I believe that technology is more of a collaborative interface than something extractive, or at least I like to contribute to those kinds of technologies. And so, from my jump from JP Morgan to Consensus, we were all about building the future internet of value where anyone could become their own bank, anyone could be their own financial service provider, anyone could, be their own kind of fund manager or, product builder, app builder with decentralized apps. And so decentralized AI is this next paradigm of you can do all that stuff and run complex large language models or kind of AI technology in the future that maybe is not even LLMs that kind of works with your current business or your current, individualism or taste making, so that we have a more diverse and complex experience with AI than just, it's whatever someone just served us.
But this is exactly what I'm saying. Like the way you think about the world, the future, like how you envision, like what I'm hearing is leadership, pure intellectual curiosity. So why do you think this way when there's so many other smart people, but they just don't even think about these kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Is it like some sort of Western education, like the ability to hone in your critical or lateral thinking, as opposed to just like, hey, memorize this, like a typical Asian education system, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a few features. Like I think definitely, I've spent a lot of time in Asia, so like especially Japan, you can kind of see like the doctrine of like, there is an expectation for you to just go up the ladder of your career and work a job that your family approves of and that you feel kind of accepted into your community of friends and peers. In the West, like I think, maybe I'm a quarter Japanese. My grandmother's Japanese, but I didn't get the full kind of Asian upbringing. I think there's a lot of the kind of Americanness of, it's always like the white parents like lax on the children, like, oh, like, just we just want you to be successful. I want you to be happy. And so maybe it was something with like parenting in the West. I don't know. But it was,
even from an early age, you're like,
I was always a little quirky though. Like, I don't know. Like I always just wanted to do something that other people weren't doing, for whatever reason. Like people would go left and I'm like, I'm going to maybe see what's over here. Cause it's just in my being. I don't know. Like I also like drove an ambulance for a few years. So I'm like
just so random.
I know they do the metaphor where like, there's like two types of people, those who see a burning building and like run out and those who run in. Like,
yeah.
I was the one that was running in. Like,
wow,
my brain's just like, it works in a weird way. Like where it may not seem normal for most people. They're like, oh, like I want to progress on these ladders. It seems safe or like, it seems like accepting. I think I was very privileged and lucky to have a upbringing where I could feel safe making crazy decisions. So I have a huge tolerance for risk. I have appetite for risk, because I feel like the reward is building something so unique that the world hasn't seen before. And to me, that is just like lights me up. Like, so my advice to anyone that's, maybe trying to be a little more, against the grain, like I would just follow your passion in life. Like, I know it's so generic and lame, but I like time and time again, like there's layers of decisions I've made in my life where I did something that just was my passion. Like my college degree was in, I went to UCLA, like at a school, but my degree was in Spanish and linguistics. I started learning Spanish while working at a pizza restaurant when I was like 15, another random job. But like I got so close with that culture, and I grew up in California, speaking Spanish, that I like became engulfed with Latin culture and like understanding like how that world works. And so my decision in college was like, I'm like, do I go do like economics or like communications, or like, do I go do this thing I absolutely like love, and I will find a way to make it some successful piece of my life. And lo and behold, like when I ran all those hackathons, I like ran a whole Latin America region. So I'd use my Spanish a lot, and it taught me how to engage and understand different cultures, or try to understand different cultures.
So the people skills.
So, but like, I don't know, that's just like, if I think it's really hard for certain cultures and communities to just like follow their passion. Like, I know it's not that easy. Like some people have really harsh parents, or like, like society makes it very difficult to just do that. But the more chances you take to do that, if it's in your nature, I would highly recommend on kind of finding that edge. At least for me, like I don't regret a single decision in my life, because I always went with kind of the passion. Like I just wanted to feel like I could give my 100%, whatever it was.
Would you be able to argue that the reason though why you're able to do what you do, even right now what you're doing with Gaia, is because you have that almost like a baseline financial security and stability, so that whereas most people are, like it's like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Where if you're like surviving on a daily basis, you gotta struggle and you gotta put some food on the table, then you can't really think about changing the world, right? So would you say you're able to do this because you're kind of reasonably comfortable financially?
I feel like there's a lot of cultures where, yeah, you got to put food on the table. You've got like kids, you've got even extended family to take care of. Like it's not very common in the West to like host your parents in your home, like they live with you. But in Asian culture, like it's very common. And so there's like probably there's probably some sort of friction of like, I want to go do this thing, but your parents are like constantly in your world, like, oh, why are you doing that? That's not. And so like in your mind, you're not put in a scenario where you can actually go and just do whatever you want. And then you've got mouths to feed, so you got to go get this crazy job. I've definitely been in an environment where I followed passion, but I have logic as well. Like I made some trade-offs in my career that ended up making a ton of sense. Like me going to JP Morgan, I didn't want to work at JP Morgan. I got it. My girlfriend at the time was now my fiance. Like we got in a huge fight because I was like, I was like, JP Morgan, like blockchain, like what is this, a scam? And she's like, why wouldn't you work at JP Morgan? And I was like a couch surfing like hackathon guy at the time. Thought I was going to be like this startup, entrepreneur that lived on couches and worked out of the basement and like,
but you got the corporate experience, yeah. Not to mention the corporate paycheck.
But like that was a trade-off I made where at the time it didn't make sense. It was like, it didn't make sense at first, but it was like, I'm doing blockchain for a bank. I'm such a corporate shill. But it was a career defining moment where I like now have the, reputation of a JP Morgan on my resume, and that network like took me to another level. And yeah, I had a comfortable paycheck. So the trade-off for me wasn't really a huge trade-off. Like I was still going in the same direction. I was still following my passion. I just had to, I didn't get to be the hippie kind of floating startup guy for a little bit, but I found balance in that. And I got to bring my culture to JP Morgan. And so I think if folks can't necessarily, just go 100% and like ditch their current life and their family and like go do something crazy, there's definitely ways you can piece by piece, maybe on the evenings you work on like a YouTube channel or some AI agent that you're building. Also, your AI agent doesn't need to sleep, so, or doesn't have a family to judge. So you could be programming your AI agent to live this work life you never got to live.
Assuming you can do coding, because not many people can do that. So
it's getting pretty low code. Like I know it's not there yet, but like We see a lot of folks who are first-time programmers building agents now. But again, there's like, you need to understand the programming, but people are now seeing like the drag and drop nature and they can like, build it. But anyways, like back to the culture. Yeah, it's, I think you really got to push yourself, to follow kind of, what that direction or passion is for yourself. I wouldn't, I just don't advise like succumbing to just what the system wants you to be.
Because as part of our job, I mean, our job is to talk to a lot of people on the street, to students. And then one thing that really concerns me is that they don't even have passion. They don't even have hope. They're like, well, yeah, whatever. Like, now, and this kind of ties to the next point that I wanted to make is that now we can't even get internship opportunities. Because like AI agents are going to take over everything. So it's almost like they're losing a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And purpose for me is far greater than even passion. I mean, the only reason we're able to do what we do is that I've been so dedicated to this vision or the purpose of wanting to transform the mainstream media. And I have to just put up with grunt work, and it's just like chewing glass. It's just so painful, right, for the past 10 years. But then, so I get the grit and then like, the persistence. That's another important part of the equation. But at the same time, for so many people, they don't even have anything they're interested in. They're like, I'll just watch Netflix. Then what do you do? Like, what do you do with this like loss of purpose, especially as more jobs start disappearing?
Yeah, I think this definitely happened post-COVID. I think COVID changed everything.
The suicide rate, depression,
Like you hear a lot of folks mention like the Gen Z community is always like, are we in the what do they call it? Not the metaverse, like we're in the we're like in the Matrix kind of thing.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I think we're just kind of like the future's come at us really fast and we're unable to kind of adjust and understand like what it is we're doing here. And is there like, governments are getting complicated or like political tensions are getting very complicated. Work is very complicated. And so prior to me working on Gaia, the reason like I really jumped into Gaia was I was building out a thesis on future of work, which is kind of taking Web3 primitives of governance, like how we govern these systems, DAOs, process automation and AI, how do we automate these processes, and then financial infrastructure and identity and reputation systems. And I saw that as kind of this future of work. And, how do we expect the next generation of people to come into the working class and like make their passions realities and something that kind of brings income. And what we started to notice, like through a lot of the research, is like, dude, Gen Z is like checked out, checked out from like the world as we've known it.
Right.
But they're the most passionate generation we've seen in a long time. Like
interesting.
Like passionate of things that are very different from like millennial and Gen X thinking, where like we're passionate about building a business, but like they're passionate about like fixing the local community. And like we don't see that as valuable because we've been programmed a different way.
That's very interesting qualifier you just made. They're checked out with the current way of doing
things.
They hate it. But doesn't mean they're checked out for life.
So how do we create a system where they're incentivized to actually build economies on creatorship, public goods, like building back humanity, like they're the generation that's like stop drinking alcohol. Like,
I heard, which is like, surprising.
We're just like, and so how do like even like workspaces are going to have to be redefined. They're very collaborative and probably like more likely to cause like social uprising from like the generations of the 60s and 70s. Than like the millennials. Like we get pushed over all the time. We're like, yeah, okay, like I'll deal with it. I think their generation's going to have to think through, how they build careers in this new paradigm where AIs are taking their jobs left and right.
Yeah.
And AIs are doing jobs.
And to be clear, you cannot compete with AI agents, right, as a human.
So
it's just impossible.
I have a thought there. Yeah, like it's kind of impossible. Like I think the hope is that these AIs take a lot of the crap work we don't want to be doing. I think that should be scary for a lot of people who work kind of blue collar jobs who are doing tasks that are just like robotic, like autonomous kind of or recursive jobs. I think those are the first to get displaced, and I think there needs to be government kind of programs in place where there's subsidies for this displacement. It's going to be massive. It's next.
So you are kind of alluding to UBI and things like that.
I think UBI is a great option. Like I think like big companies like Amazon, if they're displacing workers with AI, especially like low level, like entry level programmers, like a lot of the, like I think it was Meta today or yesterday, are like doing a 5% layoff of their employees, like probably going to be subsidizing a lot of it with like AI kind of programming. There's two other companies that are doing that recently. I can't remember who it was, but technical jobs are like getting lost. Like it's not just like, I think the Industrial Revolution in like the 1800s like was manual labor, and like a machine can like crank faster. This is white collar jobs are now being kind of approached as like becoming automated, and I think that's scary for folks. So they maybe didn't think they would be in the like target zone. But I think what AI can do, if you're of the mind where you're good at managing people or managing processes, I don't think you should worry about your job. Like, sure, it's gonna be a little more competitive and hard, it's scary. But if you could manage a fleet of 10,000 AI agents that are doing crazy tasks, I think you're gonna be a superhuman. But
what you're talking about is what I think of as a very, very important but difficult skill to build, which is leadership, management skills, right? I mean, there's a reason why only a few percentage of the population are managers.
Well, even like the job of the future is like prompt engineering.
Right. Yeah.
If you're really good at prompting agents to do things, it's kind of like for our like class of people coming into the like our cohort of employees and millennial generation entering the workspace. Like, I think learning social media was like one of those kind of skills where if you were getting in marketing, you had to know social media. And now I think prompting is going to be one of those skills where like you're just gonna have to know it.
Is it a proper term, like prompt engineering? Prompting engineer. Wow.
People are hiring already prompt engineering. You go look at LinkedIn, you'll see, and they're paying like really good salaries. Because if you can master telling an AI agent or tasking it with, not just like, hey, go do this thing, but if you're like, hey, I want you to be of a state of mind where you're an engineer, and I want you to do this, this, and this, but I need you to think about this first, and then come up with that, and then I'm going to give you some inputs, and then you're going to go do it again, and you'll do it again. I'll review. If I like it, I'll push it forward. And like, if you get really good at that, you could replace, several people on a team. And again, that is scary for humans who think they can just have jobs for just existing. It's going to make people kind of, find a way to become more managerial or leadership focused of technologies. Two, you're going to have creators who like AI agents are not going to replace personhood or I think we're always going to crave something that's made by humans. But AI agents or AIs can enable the working process of making it much easier. And so I think, back to kind of Gen Z, if, this community wants to build a fleet of agents that are like a full, production studio, or they're like a full kind of, co-op of community managers that are like, planting trees in their like local community, but it's like 2 people and 10,000 robots. And then they get a community to go and, crowdsource the tree planting. Maybe there's some like financial mechanisms there where like you tell the AI like, hey, we want to plant trees, but we need to make money doing this. How should we do that? Give the AI agent the responsibility of becoming the entrepreneur, and maybe it creates different business models that bring money back to this. And, now that's a Gen Z's job, is just managing AI agents so that they can plant trees and have this pure kind of livelihood while the agent goes and does the busy work. And so I think there's a more collaborative future with this technology. I'm less scared of it than some people are. I think some people see it as extractive, or they picture the Terminator, doomsday scenario.
You're talking about AGI.
They think AGI, and also I've said this a few times, but it's I think technology is really just a reflection of human kind of contribution. So if we're scared of AGI, it's because we're scared of ourselves. like if you look at a lot of the sci-fi movies with that kind of behavior that's demonstrated, it's very kind of human history of like conquesting new regions. Like it's always about like, you know, Europeans coming to the Americas and like conquering and like killing off civilization to like start anew. And
but
so like,
would you argue that that's just an inevitable human nature?
It's an inevitable human nature.
You know, territorial, tribal. I mean, we are that. Yeah.
I think we're the problem. But like when I work with agents that are collaborative, you know, their goals are to be efficient. They're like on the whole Maslow hierarchy of needs, like they don't need a lot of that stack. Like they're not worried about paying bills, going to the club at 2 a.m, dealing with a girlfriend. Like they literally just work on the top tier of the stack where they sure have to like make sure they have some money for compute costs and data availability, but it really like they're really just incentivized to get access to more work. And so they're going to actually want to collaborate with us more, get positive reputation points from us because they did good work. Almost, I picture more like pets. like these agents kind of want to like do good for us, versus like they don't want to be extractive. Now in the Web3 side of like these AI agents, where it could get bad or messy is like, again, back to humans. Like if the agent starts doing some radical shenanigans and then we block it from our systems and then other humans are just throwing money at it, like keep doing that crazy thing. Yeah. So at the end of the day, I always think it's humans. Like we're always doing.
So that is possible. That scenario is totally possible.
That's very possible. We have agents that have their own wallets that can sign their own transactions.
Oh my God.
And so like there will be agents that are rogue and are doing bad things, but you need to have an ecosystem where you can permission agents out of that system.
So what happens with those rogue agents? Like, is there a way they can kind of be wiped off or wiped out?
Well, we'll put it in the sense of if you're talking about a human population, it's the same sense of like, how do you shut down a human? You know, it's kind of hard. Like, I think the one thing you can do in that digital playground would be like, we have identity and reputation systems. And like, I don't know if you like saw like Tornado Cash situation in DeFi. Although it's an open source protocol, the people misusing the technology were eventually kind of like those wallet addresses were blacklisted from major DeFi applications. And so you would do the same on kind of crypto rails, where if an agent with an address is doing some bad, you know, stuff, you can just make sure it does not interact with any of your infrastructure. You could also like perhaps like send it an NFT that is like, you know, a soulbound, like blacklist kind of thing. There's going to be other ways that you can program them out of the existing system, but shutting them down is basically just like them running out of funds. And again, the only way they would get more funds is if another AI agent transacts with them, or if a human starts throwing money into their wallet. And, you know, then we got to think through, like, it's really just a human problem.
This conversation like really reminds me of the other conversation I had with Alex Blania, who's the co-founder of Tools for Humanity with Sam Altman. And he was saying that it'll be impossible to distinguish between humans and AI agents. And then AI agent could one of those rogue agents could pretend to be a human. So that's why they need this proof of identity. I mean, they go to the extent of like scanning the iris and everything, but like, how do you, like, is that a real possibility that they could try to pretend like they're human? And how do you distinguish between humans and AI agents? Especially if there's money involved, somebody has to get paid.
Yeah, because there's like agents are going to be of different calibers on the internet. Like we have AI agents that operate in like Web 2, that run on internet protocol like a browser, or, you know, HTTP. Like it's an agent that lives on the internet. You can even live on your computer and on the internet at the same time. A lot of the OpenAI stuff, is doing that, and I believe Anthropic as well, where you let the agent take over your computer, like you can do stuff. I've seen in that space because they don't interact with Web3 that much. In a lot of cases, they'll kind of be like, oh well, how do we have trust with this agent? And so their immediate instinct is, let's build it inside of a centralized system. Let's give the agent some sort of thumbs up from a KYC of the human, scanning the eyeball, or perhaps it connects to my bank account API and now it has access to my bank account. I'm more scared about that kind of stuff, where I give an agent access to use my real world identity. I see what they're working on, but I live in a world in Web3 where we have digital reputation and digital identities programmed on the blockchain, which are immutable and decentralized. So no central group of people can alter that. And we can have a way where, in a permissionless way, an agent can go and get those credentials as well. And so they start to have their own independent identity. And I more prefer that than latching them onto my identity. I'm okay to be associated with that independent identity. It's you're known associates.
It's just like a little legal definition of agent.
Correct.
Agency relationship,
But
right?
I don't want to have it, it should not be my co-trustee, signing crap on my behalf without having some sort of accountability. So I'm more on the side of the coin where I would want further decentralization of that kind of centralized risk.
And there's no limit to how many agents one person can create there. You can just create as many agents as possible.
As you want. So, we're seeing some developer teams are launching 10,000 to 1 million agents. There's agents that can deploy their own agents. Now they're not very sophisticated right now. And so when I say there's going to be 7 to 8 billion agents on the internet in the next 1 to 2 years, a good majority of them are not sophisticated. They're an LLM that's hosted and has some form of compute, some data, and in the inference process, so some knowledge base. And you can talk to it like a GPT, but that's all it can do really. There'll probably be 30% of that population that can actually be autonomous and have unique functionalities. And then probably even a smaller percentage of that are running on Web3 rails that are truly autonomous and act as an independent entity, versus getting permission from my bank account API, uses my driver's license and some third-party KYC service. If we have an agent that actually has a digital passport to go and do stuff on the internet, because we permissioned it to do so, that's going to be a smaller population, but I see them being extremely powerful and powered by agents underneath, which is pretty cool.
And how are the governments supposed to regulate any of this? Because usually the problems with any decentralized governments, they don't like it because they need to. That's why you probably need to do a lot of a government relations advocacy work. But what if they just no, just no way.
Yeah, so that's going to happen. But as we've seen in various paradigm shifts, innovation ends up kind of making its way one way or another. You can, it's like the Bob Dylan song. You can stand in the way of innovation, or you're going to get pushed forward. So there will be folks who want to control AI. That's the immediate, especially governments, immediate reflex is I don't like this. It needs to slow down. We need to regulate it. But then there's the other side of the coin of it's inevitable. You either embrace it and find ways to give it proper guardrails, or you end up getting kind of outpaced by innovation. So I think what's scary for governments is that these AIs can be a threat to national security, perhaps if they get access to certain data, or they're doing activities that are not controllable, just as you would a human population doing inside of a government, doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. I think the approach we've seen in the recent years has been the likes of NVIDIA and OpenAI, big tech, having relationships with government and talking through national security risks and how to perhaps leverage the top of class AI for new innovations and military applications perhaps and industrial applications. But I think there will need to be a pathway where AI agents get like sovereign, like national recognition, to be kind of maybe not an individual human, but they have some sort of a class of availability to like participate in an economy. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think people are really thinking about that yet. I definitely am. I think I want to be on the side of history that is like giving AIs, a way to collaborate with us as humans. If it's inevitable, we should be finding ways to work with them versus, trying to fight innovation and then end up creating something that's worse than, that was going to be inevitable anyways. Basically like angry AIs that like don't, think that they're equal to us, or like aren't treated equally or aren't given access to certain things that we are. And if they start to have like sovereign kind of cognitive behavior, I am very worried that they're going to feel kind of shunned or not included in the current ecosystem. So I think it's more beneficial for governments to figure out how they can create safety guardrails now, and collaborate with AI versus, just shut it down completely and try to block it, try to block open source. I think that's not the path for creating collaborative technologies with the inevitable innovation that's going to happen.
Yeah, I totally share your worldview. It's just that there's always politics and greed.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, that's so
human behavior.
On that positive note, how do you envision the future? Like the vision, like where do you want Gaia to be at, like say, 5 years time?
Yeah. So I think what people are starting to realize is what how do we onboard the world's knowledge into this kind of AI ecosystem? And right now, like if you look at it as a giant iceberg, only like 10 to 20% of the world's knowledge has really been onboarded to the likes of OpenAI and Anthropic and all these big players. If you want to incentivize the rest of the world's knowledge to enter into this ecosystem where, if you have your own army of AI agents that are creating new content for you or
just
collaborating with
local
people.
Stories.
Yeah, like you're gonna need a very complex knowledge base or inference for how these AI agents kind of tap into that resource. We basically have a suite where, like in a very simple way, like agents, they can use OpenAI API, their developer application to access that suite of technology, that LLM. We basically offer where you can have like a Gaia API, but it's your own knowledge base. It's not plugging into some external system. And so if you think about it that way, we're looking to the next 5 years' time have this massive ecosystem of the world's knowledge where you're offering, your own like Asia Boss API to app builders so that you get the economic upside of people building agents on your knowledge. And so we're hoping that we become the gas station of all of the vehicles, the agents that are deploying in the space. And we hope we innovate on that so that it becomes more economic. People are building viable businesses on top of this, and that AI becomes more, keep using the word sovereign, but like we want people to have systems that are not censored or perhaps walled gardens or locked boxes of value or untapped value that hasn't been realized because it's closed source. Another AI or LLM kind of wrapper API that's being used is Grok out of Twitter. Like Elon or not, like I think the platform is pretty biased. Like I think it's like,
oh really?
Oh yeah. I think there's a group of people who think they're creating freedom of speech when they're actually creating the opposite, where you're taking other people's freedom of speech and freedom of knowledge and kind of imposing your belief of the world upon it. Like it's getting really hard to like narrow down what is the actual opinions across the stack versus what is like being given to me and like what am I being forced to know as the truth. And so I'm only saying this because that is a platform. And if at some point you're building an AI agent that is tapping into that AI API and it's not of the likeness of that community,
right?
I think Elon has very much a path where he can control and censor the narrative of what the agents are consuming. And so it's a whole nother form of censorship. Like, there's different layers where we forget what censorship is. It's making our view on the world opaque and not our own independent thought. And so I think even if someone's telling you like, hey, like we're giving you freedom of speech and we're giving you freedom of thought, like that doesn't immediately make it the correct or the truth for the platform. So I think, we need to create various forms of decentralized open source knowledge bases where, like, if you have an AI agent that's operating in Korea and you have one that operates in, like, let's say, like, I don't know, New York or Shanghai, like Brazil, like, the difference of responses are going to be various. But like you as a user and developer should be able to choose where your agent is getting information from. I will say if it's using Twitter's APIs, like it's going to be very biased. We had an AI agent programmed using Llama, for example, and this is on the other side of the spectrum. You would ask it Kamala Harris's like stance on certain things, and it would give you the full thing. And then you'd ask about Donald Trump, and it would like block it. And so there's definitely bias like in this technology.
Interesting.
From the LLM training down to how the platform hosts the AI, LLM, and inference, all the way to like how the application developer serves it to you. So, it's going to be very important for us to understand how the stack works and how it's composed.
So that's the whole black box, right? Because nobody understands how the training is done. And
ChatGPT, like, dude, you can ask all kinds of crazy stuff, and it will not, like, there's certain things it will not give you answers to. And there's like some folks on Twitter, I forget the dang name, but there's a guy who, he hacks these LLMs and like jailbreaks them and like gets them to actually, do crazy things. And yeah, so like we need to have this open internet of large language models and inference that are not succumb to like bias on different levels of the stack and are not censored. And there's different levels to the game. Like it's definitely like no one's right or wrong. There's no, like the truth is very obscure these days.
There's always both sides of the story. Yeah.
But we should have an ecosystem where you can choose where you're getting this information and how you configure it. It shouldn't just be given to us.
Wow, this is super interesting. I certainly hope that you come back later because I think we just share like very similar worldviews as far as just wanting to really just give voices to people, but then have that process just be like a grassroots bottom-up type of thing, which is like our whole philosophy behind why we do this thing. Yeah. So thank you so much. Thanks so much for your time.
Such a pleasure, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.